They won't tell you this. They won't tell you that the hardest part isn't failing. It's waking up every day and choosing to keep going when no one is watching. They won't tell you that most people who make it there didn't feel confident, didn't feel ready, and didn't feel special at the beginning. They felt tired. They felt invisible. They felt like quitting more times than they can count. They won't tell you that the world doesn't reward potential. It rewards persistence. That talent is common, but commitment is rare. That being misunderstood is not a curse. It's often the sign you're doing something real. They won't tell you that growth is quiet. It doesn't come with applause. It comes with long nights, self-doubt, and moments where you question your own worth. And they won't tell you this either. If you're still here, still trying, still searching for something more, you're already stronger than you think. This is what they won't tell you. They won't tell you that pain is not the enemy. They talk about it like something to avoid, something to escape, something to numb or hide behind distractions. But pain is not here to destroy you. Pain is here to introduce you to yourself. It arrives quietly at first, like a question you don't know how to answer. Then it stays long enough to demand honesty. Most people run from it. They look for shortcuts, excuses, people to blame, reasons to stop. What they don't understand is that pain is the price of becoming someone who can carry more than yesterday. They won't tell you that strength is built in silence, not in applause, not in motivation videos, not in moments where everyone is cheering your name. Strength is built when no one is watching you struggle, when no one is there to clap for the effort you put in, when the only witness to your discipline is the version of you that wants to quit. Silence is uncomfortable because it forces you to listen to your own thoughts. And most people are afraid of what they'll hear when the noise disappears. They won't tell you that the days that change you the most look ordinary from the outside. No dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden clarity, just you waking up tired, carrying doubts you didn't ask for, doing the work anyway, again and again. It's boring, it's repetitive, and that's why it works. Because consistency doesn't care how you feel. It only responds to what you do. They won't tell you that being strong often means being misunderstood. When you stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen, they call you distant. When you choose discipline over comfort, they call you obsessed. When you outgrow places that once felt safe, they call you ungrateful. What they don't see is that you're not trying to be better than anyone else. You're just trying to be honest about who you need to become. They won't tell you that healing is not gentle all the time. Sometimes it feels like tearing down parts of yourself you once relied on to survive. Patterns that kept you safe at one point can keep you stuck later. Letting go of them feels like losing a piece of your identity. But growth requires courage, not comfort. It asks you to sit with discomfort long enough to learn from it instead of running away. They won't tell you that confidence doesn't come from winning. It comes from surviving moments you thought would break you. It comes from realizing that even on your worst days, you didn't disappear. You endured, you adapted, you kept breathing. Confidence grows quietly from proof, not praise, proof that you can handle more than you once believed. They won't tell you that discipline is an act of self-respect, not punishment, not control. It's the decision to show up for yourself even when motivation disappears. Motivation is emotional, discipline is loyal. Motivation asks how you feel today. Discipline asks who you promised yourself you would become. They won't tell you that becoming stronger often means becoming alone for a while. Not because you're better than others, but because your priorities change. The conversations that once satisfied you start to feel empty. The habits that once distracted you start to feel heavy. Loneliness isn't always the absence of people. Sometimes it's the distance between who you are becoming and who you used to be. They won't tell you that growth hurts because it challenges your old limits. Your mind will resist it. Your body will resist it. Your environment will resist it. Not because you're wrong, but because change threatens comfort. Every level you reach demands that you release something you've been holding on to. Old beliefs, old fears, old versions of yourself. They won't tell you that strength is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't need approval. It shows up early. It stays late. It keeps its word when no one is counting. Real strength doesn't need to be loud because it's not trying to prove anything. They won't tell you that the hardest battles you'll fight won't be visible. They happen in your mind, late at night, when doubts replay old failures and insecurities whisper familiar lies. The fight is choosing not to believe every thought you have. The fight is learning to pause, to breathe, to respond instead of react. They won't tell you that resilience is built through repetition, through getting back up more times than you can remember, through forgiving yourself for falling short and refusing to use it as an excuse to stop. Resilience isn't dramatic, it's persistent. It's the quiet decision to try again without needing a guarantee that things will work out. They won't tell you that being strong doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you don't let pain decide your future. You feel it, you acknowledge it, you learn from it, and then you move forward with it, not away from it. Strength isn't the absence of emotion, it's the ability to carry emotion without being controlled by it. They won't tell you that sometimes progress looks like rest, like stepping back before you break, like choosing patience over pressure. The world glorifies burnout and calls it ambition, but real strength knows when to slow down so it can last longer. They won't tell you that becoming disciplined will cost you comfort. Late nights, easy mornings, instant gratification. But what it gives you in return is something most people never experience: self-trust, knowing that when things get hard, you won't abandon yourself. They won't tell you that silence is where clarity lives. When you stop consuming everyone else's opinions, you start hearing your own direction. The path becomes clearer when you're no longer trying to impress people who don't have to live your life. They won't tell you that strength grows when you stop asking why things are happening to you and start asking what they're teaching you. Pain becomes information, failure becomes feedback, setbacks become redirection. They won't tell you that the strongest people you'll meet are often the quietest. They don't talk much about what they've been through because they don't need sympathy. They've already made peace with their story. They've learned that carrying it with dignity matters more than explaining it to everyone. They won't tell you that the journey changes you in ways success never could. It teaches humility, patience, perspective. It strips away illusions and leaves you with what is real, and what's real is enough. They won't tell you that every time you choose discipline over excuses, you rewrite your identity. You're no longer someone who tries. You become someone who does. Identity follows action, not intention. They won't tell you that strength is built one decision at a time, one honest choice, one uncomfortable step, one quiet promise kept, and those decisions compound slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize you're standing taller than you used to, carrying weight that once felt impossible. They won't tell you that loneliness is part of becoming more. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind where you're completely alone, but the quiet kind where you're surrounded by people and still feel unseen. That loneliness shows up when your mindset changes before your environment does, when your questions get deeper, but the answers around you stay shallow, when you're growing internally, but the world still expects you to stay familiar. They won't tell you that the path forward often feels empty at first. Fewer messages, fewer invitations, fewer people asking how you're doing, not because you've failed, but because you've stopped performing for validation. You're no longer feeding the version of yourself that needed approval to feel worthy. They won't tell you that loneliness sharpens you. It forces you to confront yourself without distraction. There's no one to blame, no one to impress, no one to hide behind, just you, your thoughts, and the responsibility of deciding who you're going to be when no one is guiding you. They won't tell you that most people quit not because the work is too hard, but because the silence gets too loud. The absence of recognition feels like rejection. The lack of feedback feels like failure. But silence is not rejection. Silence is space, space to grow without interference. They won't tell you that the moment you stop needing constant reassurance is the moment you start becoming dangerous in the best way. Not reckless, not aggressive, but grounded, stable, unshakable. You stop asking the world for permission to believe in yourself. They won't tell you that loneliness teaches discernment. You become careful about who you let close. You listen more. You speak less. You stop explaining your dreams to people who only understand excuses. You learn that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. They won't tell you that the strongest connections are built after periods of isolation. When you finally meet people who speak the same language of effort, discipline, and self-respect, the connection feels effortless because you've already done the internal work. They won't tell you that loneliness reveals what you've been using people for. Distraction, validation, escape. When those are gone, you're left with what actually matters: purpose, direction, integrity. They won't tell you that there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is physical, loneliness is emotional, and sometimes loneliness shows up even in crowds because you're no longer aligned with who you used to be. They won't tell you that growth requires distance, distance from old habits, old conversations, old cycles. Distance doesn't mean disrespect. It means evolution. They won't tell you that solitude strengthens your intuition. When the noise fades, you start trusting your inner voice more. You begin to recognize when something feels wrong, even if it looks right on the surface. They won't tell you that loneliness is temporary, but the clarity it gives you is permanent. Once you see what truly matters to you, it's impossible to unsee it. They won't tell you that people may misinterpret your silence. They'll assume you think you're better than them, that you've changed for the worse, that you've become cold. But silence doesn't mean arrogance. It means focus. They won't tell you that during lonely seasons, your relationship with yourself is being rebuilt. You learn how to encourage yourself, how to calm yourself, how to sit with discomfort without needing to escape it. They won't tell you that loneliness teaches patience, patience with progress, patience with timing, patience with yourself. You learn that not everything needs to happen immediately to be meaningful. They want to tell you that some of the most important decisions you'll ever make will happen in quiet moments when no one is influencing you, when no one is watching, when no one is applauding. They won't tell you that loneliness strengthens your standards. You stop settling for surface-level connections. You stop accepting environments that drain you. You stop compromising values just to feel included. They won't tell you that loneliness is where independence is born. Emotional independence, mental independence, the kind that doesn't collapse when external support disappears. They won't tell you that once you've learned how to stand alone, you stop fearing abandonment, you stop clinging, you stop chasing, you choose relationship, not depend on them. They won't tell you that the path feels lonely because it's less crowded. Most people choose comfort over growth, distraction over discipline, familiar pain over uncertain progress. They won't tell you that the loneliness you feel now is proof that you're moving forward, not backward, that you're outgrowing something that once defined you. They won't tell you that one day you'll look back at this quiet phase and realize it was the foundation, the part where you learned how to survive without applause, how to move without permission, how to believe without evidence. They won't tell you that loneliness doesn't last forever, but the strength you build in it stays with you long after the noise returns. They won't tell you that discipline is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't show up with motivation or inspiration. It shows up when you don't want to, when the energy is gone, when the mood is wrong, when excuses feel reasonable. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It asks what needs to be done. They won't tell you that most people wait to feel ready before they act. Discipline works in reverse. You act first and readiness follows, confidence follows, clarity follows. The mistake is believing that action requires certainty. It doesn't. It requires commitment. They won't tell you that discipline is built in small decisions that seem meaningless at the time. Waking up when it's easier to stay in bed, stopping when it's easier to scroll, continuing when it's easier to quit. These moments don't feel powerful, but they shape your identity quietly. They won't tell you that discipline is a form of self-trust. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. And when life gets heavy, that belief matters more than motivation ever will. They won't tell you that the hardest part of discipline is not starting, it's continuing when results are invisible, when effort feels wasted, when progress feels slow. Discipline survives without feedback. That's why it separates those who change from those who stay the same. They won't tell you that discipline removes the need for constant decision making. When you commit to standards, you stop negotiating with yourself every day. You conserve energy for execution, not excuses. They won't tell you that discipline feels restrictive at first, but freeing later. Freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want. It comes from knowing you can do what you must, regardless of how you feel. They won't tell you that discipline protects you from your weakest moments. It carries you when emotions fluctuate. It steadies you when motivation collapses. It keeps you moving when doubt tries to slow you down. They won't tell you that discipline creates momentum. One action leads to another. One completed task makes the next one easier. Momentum builds quietly, but once it's there, it changes everything. They won't tell you that discipline is personal. What works for someone else may not work for you. Discipline isn't about copying routines. It's about understanding your weaknesses and building systems that support you when willpower fails. They won't tell you that discipline requires boundaries. Boundaries with people, with time, with distractions. Saying no isn't selfish, it's necessary. Every yes costs something. Discipline decides what's worth the cost. They won't tell you that discipline teaches patience. Real progress takes time. Discipline keeps you consistent long enough to see results that shortcuts never produce. They won't tell you that discipline is a skill, not a personality trait. It can be trained, strengthened, rebuilt after failure. Missing a day doesn't erase your progress unless you let it. They won't tell you that discipline changes how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone who hopes. You become someone who acts, someone who follows through, someone who doesn't rely on circumstances to move forward. They won't tell you that discipline creates quiet confidence, not arrogance, not ego, just the calm knowing that you can handle what's ahead because you've handled what's behind. They won't tell you that discipline doesn't mean being hard on yourself. It means being honest with yourself. Compassion keeps you human. Discipline keeps you moving. They won't tell you that discipline shapes your future long before success becomes visible. The results show up later, but the work is happening beneath the surface, unnoticed. They won't tell you that discipline builds stability in an unstable world. When everything feels uncertain, your routines become anchors. Your habits become structure. They won't tell you that discipline is choosing long-term respect over short-term comfort. Every time you choose comfort, you delay growth. Every time you choose discipline, you invest in who you're becoming. They won't tell you that discipline doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees growth. And growth changes your capacity, your perspective, your standards. They won't tell you that one day discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like identity. You don't force it anymore. You live it. It becomes who you are when no one is watching. They won't tell you that identity is not something you discover. It's something you build. Most people spend their lives asking who they are, waiting for clarity, waiting for confidence, waiting for certainty to arrive. But identity doesn't arrive. It's formed through choices, through patterns, through what you do repeatedly when no one is correcting you. They tell you that your past does not define you, but it does inform you. It shows you where you've been weak, where you've been afraid, where you've survived despite not knowing how. The mistake is letting history become a prison instead of a reference point. They won't tell you that change feels like losing yourself before it feels like becoming someone new. Old habits fall apart. Old beliefs stop making sense. The structure you relied on disappears, and for a while you feel unrecognizable even to yourself. They won't tell you that identity shifts quietly. There's no announcement, no ceremony. One day you simply respond differently to things that once controlled you. You pause instead of reacting. You walk away instead of chasing. You choose differently without needing to explain why. They won't tell you that growth requires honesty, not positivity. You don't change by pretending everything is fine. You change by admitting where you're inconsistent, where you're afraid, where you've been avoiding, responsibility. They won't tell you that self-respect is built through alignment, when your words match your actions, when your values match your decisions, when you stop betraying yourself for convenience. They won't tell you that identity is reinforced through discomfort. Every time you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, you strengthen the version of yourself you're trying to become. They won't tell you that letting go of old identities feels like grief. Even unhealthy versions of yourself once served a purpose. Releasing them feels like saying goodbye to someone familiar. They won't tell you that people may resist your change, not because you're wrong, but because your growth challenges their comfort. Your discipline exposes their excuses. Your boundaries disrupt their access. They won't tell you that you don't need to convince anyone of who you're becoming. Consistency will do that for you, quietly. Over time, they won't tell you that identity is shaped in private moments, how you speak to yourself when you fail, how you behave when you're disappointed, how you recover when things don't go your way. They won't tell you that becoming a better version of yourself doesn't mean rejecting who you were. It means integrating the lessons without carrying the weight. They won't tell you that identity solidifies when you stop seeking external validation, when approval becomes optional instead of necessary, when self-respect replaces applause. They won't tell you that clarity comes after commitment, not before. You decide first. You understand later. Action sharpens identity. They won't tell you that you are always becoming something, whether intentionally or not. Every habit votes for the person you will be tomorrow. They won't tell you that the strongest identity is flexible, not rigid. It adapts without breaking. It evolves without losing integrity. They won't tell you that one day you won't need to remind yourself who you are trying to be. Your choices will reflect it automatically. Your standards will enforce it naturally. Your presence will communicate it without words.